It's a new day for hope, healing, and happiness with Natasha J. Rosewood.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on It's a New Day for Hope, Healing, and Happiness. And on today's show, contrary to what's in my background here, which we're playing with, I know it looks like a spaceship and I'm about to be abducted, but we're not doing a show on alien abductions today. We are going to be talking about, are you people pleasing? We all do it. It's kind of a tricky thing to do. So my guest today, a special guest, is going to be Vanessa Ooms, and she has written a lovely, fantastic book called Do It For You, How to Stop People Pleasing and Find Peace. So she'll be coming on shortly, and we'll be exploring all the dynamics of people pleasing, because I know we've all done it, whether as children or adults, teenagers. It's a nasty habit. So we're going to learn how we can break that today. And if you would like to come on the show, if you look on the show notes onto the guest link, you can come on either during the interview or after the interview to ask Vanessa questions about people pleasing, or if you have a psychic question for me, you can come on too and just let me know what you'd like to know. So please join us. This show is for you, for hope, healing, and happiness. So Jason, do we have Vanessa joining us? Yay! There she is. Hi, Vanessa. Welcome to It's a New Day.
Hi, Natasha.
Oh, good. We can hear you. That's great. I just want to thank you so much for writing this book. And I haven't read it word for word, but I flicked through it and I've seen quite a lot of stuff that all I can say is I wish I'd had this when I was a teenager and dealing with my narcissistic mother. It would have saved me decades of agony in dealing with being in hell with her. It was very sad because she was very damaged. And so she became, and she was also very psychic, and she was psycho and narcissistic, and then she became an alcoholic. So she was quite a package, let me tell you. And I learned about her, though, about people pleasing from her. And so I learned to, in the end, finally tell her to stop with the suicidal threats, because I knew that was manipulation. And eventually I left the airline I was working with that was working me to death as well. So there was another people pleasing situation at the same time. And then finally I left the country, but I don't recommend, doing all these drastic measures just to get away from people pleasing. So tell me, what are the main dynamics or the main patterns in people pleasing with us?
Oh, well, the main patterns that I've noticed coming up for people, myself included, is, not saying no when you truly want to say no, kind of ignoring your own feelings and needs, and overcommitting yourself, saying yes to too many things, and then you end up burning yourself out. Those are the big three that I see in a lot of people pleasers, and I've done way too many times myself.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the no thing, because I was listening to Louise Hay. She wrote the book You Can Heal Your Life, and she facilitated many workshops. And she was talking the other day about, well, she's passed now, but so she was talking on YouTube about a woman in a workshop who actually had breast cancer, and she was physically incapable of saying the word no to her family. And Louise Hay got her finally to say no. And when she finally said it, she actually started screaming it. And she was crying and laughing at the same time. And guess what? The breast cancer went away. So I know this dynamic can make us sick. It nearly killed me when I was in the UK. So where do you think this comes from, this kind of thought that we need to people please in order just to be okay in our situations?
Right. Well, it's kind of ingrained in us. I mean, we're tribal social creatures, and back in the days before technology and ways that we could be self-sufficient, we really did rely on each other. So we had to be accepted by our tribes in order to survive. So it's in our genetic makeup, but in more modern times, it can be anything from a narcissistic caregiver, which I had as well, and just constantly trying to smooth the waters for everyone around us so that it can be okay. um, and or even just, having parents or caregivers who have really high expectations and just wanting to meet those expectations constantly.
Exactly. I mean, I know as babies, I read this once that we learn to manipulate and people please our parents because if we don't get their approval, we can starve to death. We might not have any shelter. We might be tossed out, tossed out of the home. So it's a very, like you say, very instinctual survival mechanism when we're little. And I do understand that, we're programmed, but I think they say if you get to the age of seven, and the parents haven't done a good job of maybe, inculcating the child with positive kind of self-esteem, they fail. If I think there was a show called "If You Don't Succeed at First, You Fail," and then the other day I was listening to Joe Dispenza, and he talks about getting to the age of 35, and by then our beliefs and our modus operandum is really embedded in our brain, and it's like then we have to work really hard to change our brain. So, is there an age that you think that people is the best for them to kind of become aware of their people-pleasing dynamic and move on, or can
That's
we
a
do it
good.
at any time?
Well, you can do it at any time. It might be easier when we're younger, because, like you say, you have more neuroplasticity, but really you can pump the brakes and and pivot at any time in your life. It just takes a little bit of work and just practicing new things.
Yeah. And do you find people that are people pleasing that don't know that they're doing it? It's so kind of automatic.
Definitely. Actually, most people pleasers that I know, it's almost become like a subconscious program, and it almost becomes your personality. And
Wow.
for me, that was the biggest aha moment that was really quite shocking, was I realized how much of my personality I'd built around people pleasing. So
Wow.
when I started to actually shift out of that, it was like relearning who I actually am.
Yes. And is that a shock?
Huge shock to the system, because you've been living a certain way for so long and identifying with that,
Yes.
when you realize that that's not actually who you are, it's a survival mechanism. It's so rattling. Like, I went through quite a bit of time where I just felt like I was kind of in this weird floaty dream space, because I had no grounding. I
Right.
didn't actually know who I was anymore, or what I wanted, or even what I
Right.
needed. So
Yes.
yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, floating in a sea of confusion for a while.
Yeah, because it's like giving up an addiction, a little bit like an addiction. And you feel like there's this big vacuum, like, well, what do I do with this space now? Who am I? Like you said. I want to talk a little bit about relationship dynamics because, there are people like bullies and narcissists, as we say. I'd say my mother was actually a bully as well. And, I used to be the victim. Of course, I thought I was the victim. But then in my spiritual growth, I realized that before we come here, while we're still in spirit, we write our own life movie and we're the star of our movie and we bring in all these characters, our parents, our siblings, our significant others, people that really are horrible to us and people that are wonderful to us. And I teach this when I'm doing psychic readings because what I'm teaching is empowerment, and go, I chose this person. What was I thinking? I could have had a V8, but I really am grateful to my mother now because she was my most profound experience relationship wise. And obviously I was a people pleaser, but now I'm recovering people pleaser. So it's all good. But without her, I wouldn't have dug so deep into who I am once I got away from her and realized how she motivated me to really be strong, to kind of dig deep and find out why these things happen, not just to her, but to why did that happen to that person, not that person. So I want people to realize that even if they're people pleasing, to remember that they may have created this character in their movie to bring them a gift of some kind. So it's not all about feeling bad about people pleasing. What do you say to that to your clients?
Yeah, I agree with you. And it is really empowering when you realize that you don't have to be the victim in your life. You can actually choose to change roles and become, the lead character in your life who gets to call the shots.
Right.
And that's a huge shift that I love to take people through, because it's amazing to watch people just blossom when they realize that they're actually in control of this. And that's just a massive shift to go out of victim consciousness into I'm in charge of my life.
Exactly. Exactly. And I warn people, I'm sure you do too, that when we shift and we increase in our frequency and we want to grow, blossom and grow, that we'll be leaving those people behind. And those people don't like it. Like, what do you mean you're not going to pick me up from the airport on Sunday at 5 o'clock? What's your problem, And then they wonder why that, like, the relationship breaks down. So I always comfort people and say, don't worry, you're going to meet new people. There might be a little bit of a void in between. So what's the first step in kind of turning the corner from people pleasing into becoming empowered again?
Right. Well, for myself and for a lot of my clients, actually, it's been learning how to say no is kind of the first step, because when we're in that victim mode and mentality, we're just kind of at the whims of all of the people in our lives. So when you start to say no, you start to actually dictate what you will and won't do and what you actually have space for. And so learning to start to say no actually starts to bring in awareness as
Mm-hmm.
well
Mm-hmm.
around all of the ways that you do people please. And sometimes we rush into saying yes before we even think about it or look at our calendars or check in with ourselves about, if we actually have space for what's being asked of us. So that's usually
Exactly.
where I start, is learning how to say no and where your boundaries are, and becoming aware of your actual energy reserves and space for things that you can do in a day.
Yeah. And I think in society at large, we're kind of bombarded by the thought that, oh, we have to give or we're being selfish. I mean, that was my mother's favorite saying. Well, she was a narcissist. Of course, she was going to accuse me of being selfish. She was a bottomless pit of neediness, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to living with those kind of people. But Anthony Robbins said something, the motivational speaker. He said, or you can have anything you want in your life if you're willing to give others what they want. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, that's a bit manipulative, or that's a bit kind of needy. But then you could look at that and say, okay, when you give, you kind of open up to receiving as well. And the Buddhists even say generosity is the virtue that creates peace. So how do we know, am I being selfish? Should I not? Should I say no? Should I say yes? There's a bit of a tug of war sometimes. How do you guide people to deal with that?
Yeah, because it can be a tug of war sometimes. And we might not always find a perfect balance. I mean, there will be times in life where we do have to give more. Say a family member is sick and you're looking after them. They're not going to be able to reciprocate. That's
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, saying no to taking on a project when you don't have the space, that's not being selfish. That's being realistic. And that's actually being considerate of the other person as well. Because if you say that you're going to do something and you don't have the space, you're not going to do a good job. It could
Right.
actually harm that relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about coming from the truth. I think my
Yeah.
my kind of go-to now is how does this feel? Does this feel good to say yes to this? Do I want to? Is it coming from the heart? Or if I say no, will I feel like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person? But the yes thing coming from the heart really helps me because I want to be doing it from the heart. I don't want to be like, do I have to do this kind of thing? Because that really amplifies the negative energy of the situation, and it doesn't do anybody any good. So my thing about even making any kind of decision is taking A and B and going, well, if I do A, how does this feel? Is this heavy? Or if I do B, is this heavier? Is this lighter? Is this more exciting? Does this feel right? So, I get people to check in with themselves and say, how does that feel for you? Because that intuition, that heart energy is telling you and guiding you all the time how to stay on track. So what do you think is the difference between selfish, selfless, and what was it? There was another one.
I think you had self-centered.
Self-centered, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. And that was a good question. I had to think about it. And I think being selfish is going into a situation in a manipulative way, thinking about what you're going to get out of it. And you're just thinking about yourself. Self-centeredness is kind of more when people are just in their own worlds and not aware of anything that's happening for anyone else around them. I find that to be self-centered. It's just like they've got blinders on and just
Mm-hmm.
can't see, so they might not even realize the way that they're acting, but they might be willing to change. A self-centered person might be willing to change.
Yeah.
Uh, and then selfless, I think selfless is when you're helping another person and not expecting anything from it.
Yes. I think that's good. So we need a good word because I've told people to be selfish.
Yeah.
I say, for a change, just think of yourself. So can we
Mhm.
come up with a new word, do you think, that says it's okay to just do what you want to do? My thing is, and I could tell many of my clients, is make yourself happy first because your brain and your heart are emanating all this frequency of energy. You're like a little pebble in a pond sending out waves. And if you're sending out waves, unhappy, miserable, resentful, it's not good. It's not good being around those people. So I say, what's going to make you happy? So I always want my clients, I always encourage them to come from the happy place. And if it means, that you want to move to Timbuktu and your family aren't going to like it, oh well, right? Maybe you just need to do that for a while to explore that. And they'll come and visit if they really love you that much, right? But we've got to follow our own path with a reasonable consideration of others, of course. There's going to be a balance there. I know when I was flying and in our flying training, we taught, of course, if there's a decompression, we've got to put the oxygen mask on our face first. Of course, I've been around my mother who I had to do everything for her first. I'm going, well, isn't that selfish? And I think it's a great analogy because they told us, well, and I questioned it. And they said, well, Natasha, if you're lying unconscious on the floor, you're not going to be able to save anybody. And I thought that is such a good analogy for how to choose how you're helping people. Is it going to save others or is it going to be actually damaging in the bigger picture? So I think that's a way to maybe measure it. It's like, am I going to be unconscious if I do this?
Yeah, right. That's
Okay.
what I do with analogies is the air.
So you've written this book. I love how you've used simple language. I hear you talking. I hear your voice in it. It's very clearly laid out. It's beautifully edited, which doesn't always happen, and that drives me crazy. So thank you for that, Vanessa. Oops.
Important.
And it's easy to follow, and it feels like you cover a lot of bases. You talk about codependency and setting boundaries and all that good stuff. So it's a real practical guide on how to, and it's very compassionate. I notice, you brought up a lot of different situations for people that they go through, especially mothers. who are trained to be focused on everybody else. So it's very challenging. One thing I wanted to ask you quickly is, do you think this is a more male or female dynamic of people pleasing?
I think it's more female centric. I do know a few men who are people pleasers as well, but it's a lot more women.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's
It would
kind
make
of
sense.
yeah, it's our nature to be nurturers and to look after
Yes.
everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we really have to look at ourselves and look at our dynamics. Before I finish, I just would like to know your story a bit about what motivated you to get into this area, because it's very powerful.
It is very powerful. And yeah, so I had a what Jeff Brown calls a life quake, where
Ah.
everything in my life kind of fell down around me, a tower moment, if you will, where I had a relationship dissolve because he was cheating on me, and we had to shut down our business, and all of these things happened in my life that it just shocked me to my core. And I had, being alone, I had a lot of time to sit and think about, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to realize that I had shaped my entire life around my partner and his dreams and what he wanted to do, and totally left my dreams to the side. And that was my big aha moment of just like, wow, I wasn't just helping him. I had molded my entire life and kind of
Mm-hmm.
personality to be
Mm-hmm.
what he wanted, which is
Mm-hmm.
how I knew to get love. And
Yes.
and it didn't work. And it
No.
didn't work because it wasn't balanced, and I wasn't creating from, a positive energy like you talk about.
Right.
So it was a big wake up call. And from there, I started really examining how I show up in life, and how I interact with other people, and how quick I am to say yes to everything. I had one boss who called me the okay lady because I said okay to everything.
Oh no, that's not good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So, I was going to ask you something there. How, if people want to connect with you, are you offering coaching sessions? I forget now. Are you doing that or
Yeah. Yeah,
good?
so we can find that and book in with me at vanessaooms.com. And
Okay,
yeah, and I'm on social media as well, on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. And
awesome.
I am starting an online community probably next month. So, well, there'll be more information about that on my website.
Fantastic. And I'm just going to state the obvious. I'm guessing that you love yourself more now. You've gone through this.
Very much so.
Can now
Yeah.
are you yeah, are you one of the rare beings that can stand in front of the mirror and look yourself in the eye and go, I love you? Can you do
Yeah,
that? How'd it
I can
go?
now. It took some time, but
I
I can
know.
honestly say that I'm there now, and it feels
Yeah.
really nice.
Because that's the key. And just to finish this off, I'm just going to suggest for my audience to do that, to stand in front of the mirror, look yourself and say, I love these 10 things about you. You rock. And then do that in the morning. You'll have a fabulous day.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Vanessa. I'll just hold this up again. It's called Do It For You, How to Stop People Pleasing and Find Peace. And Vanessa is highly intuitive. So I know if you've got an interesting dynamic going on, she'll absolutely be able to get you on the straight and narrow and stop people pleasing. So thank you so much, Vanessa. And we'll be in touch. No doubt we'll be doing some more on this giving power away and people pleasing in the future. So
Beautiful.
thank you to everybody for joining me on this show. And next week, we're going to be talking about a very powerful topic, addictions. And my special guest, Marie Martin, will be on. She works with people who are addicted And we're going to be discussing and exploring the relationship between trauma and addictions and removing some of the shame. Because my theory is when people don't behave well, it means they're not happy in themselves and they need our compassion, not our judgment. So, please come on the show next week. This show is for you. So if you have any suggestions about topics, please let me know. And at the end of each show, we do make some time available for you to come on and ask questions. Either ask me a psychic question or the guest. So until then, we'll see you next Wednesday. And thank you for being amazing. Remember, it's a new day, and with new thoughts and new feelings, you can have a brighter future. Amen, so be it, and so it is. Namaste.